sonst. War auch so kacke.
Testing 1 2, testing 1 2, testing 1 2.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much for being with us today on this very, very significant occasion for the launch of the Australian Catholic Bishop Conference annual social justice statement. Truth and peace, a gospel word in a violent world. It's a very catching title and one that illustrates the grave significance of the content of the statement itself and the world in which we live today. My name is Greg Bainey. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Bishop's Commission for Social Justice, Mission and Service. And my co-MC here is Peter Arndt, and I'll let Peter introduce himself.
Thanks, Greg. Hello, everyone. Peter Arndt, as Greg said, Director of the Bishop's Conference's Office for Justice, Ecology and Peace. And behind me you can see my guide dog Yoda.
At the present time, in the present world and in our present nation, as the social justice statement that we're celebrating today points out, and we are experiencing tremendous conflict around the world. And at any given time, 2 billion, with a B, people are caught up in this conflict. And every other day, Pope Francis is pleading for peace, for world peace, for regional peace, and for local peace. So it's very apt that the bishops of Australia seek to shine a light on the gospel as the way for the world to face these problems. The Gospels give vital guidance to Christians and to all people of goodwill and help us cultivate a culture of peace, not violence. The social justice statement tells us that we cannot have peace without truth. So often, global conflicts find their genesis in a lack of truth and dishonesty. And we're going to hear more about this from Bishop Vincent Long, the Bishop of Parramatta Diocese and the Chair of the Commission for Social Justice, Mission and Peace, and also from Associate Professor Joel Hodge from the Australian Catholic University soon. Today we are joined by a number of significant people. Well, you're all significant. It's lovely to see so many students here from the schools in the Diocese of Parramatta. But our dignitaries and VIPs are particularly welcome, and we thank them for being with us today. Mr. Hugh McDermott, the State Member for Prospect. The Mayor of Cumberland City, Mayor Councillor Lisa Lake. Father Jack, one of the clergy here from this parish of OLQP, Our Lady Queen of Peace, an apt parish selection for the topic in which we are speaking today. The Vicars General for the Diocese of Parramatta, Father Peter Williams and Father Fernando Montano. Representatives from our neighbouring dioceses. We have Sydney, Wollongong and Broken Bay Diocese here represented, as well as many staff from the Diocese of Parramatta. I'd also particularly like to welcome from the Australian Catholic Bishops Conference our General Secretary, Father Chris D'Souza, who would be known to many of you here in the Diocese of Parramatta. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Father Chris's, would you believe today, 41st anniversary of his ordination into the priesthood. We also welcome local religious and religious from further afield. There are a number of religious congregations and justice groups of those communities represented here today. We thank you for the vision and the history that the religious bring, particularly to this region in the Diocese of Parramatta and the founding of the church. We have a number of Catholic social justice organisations here today. Of course, Caritas Australia, Jesuit Social Services, the Josephite Justice Network, Marist 180, and the International Justice Mission, to name a few that I know are here today, and forgive me if I've overlooked your group. To the Diocese of Parramatta itself, thank you for hosting this event. To the school, to the parish of Our Lady Queen of Peace, to the Chancery team, to parish social justice groups who are represented here, Catholic Schools Office led by Jack and his team, to the Mission Enhancement team, to Catholic Care and Community Ventures, Catholic Youth and the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine. It's a tremendous cross-section of the church here today, and we thank you all and commend you all for being here. To those of you who are at home watching online, Peter and I would like to pay particular acknowledgement. I know the camera's down there, and you might just keep in mind, those of you here today in the audience, that we have a large viewing audience online, streaming around the world. I'm sure there are millions watching around the world. I'm sorry I wasn't able to speak in all of the languages of all of those nations that are watching. But I want to acknowledge the folks at home. During the ceremony this morning and proceedings, there will be an opportunity for you here in the hall to speak with one another and perhaps generate some questions to ask of our speakers. Those of you that are home will be invited to post a comment or a question in the online chat. More about that soon. Now, you probably all know this very, very clearly, but Social Justice Sunday is this Sunday. And it's a significant occasion in the Catholic calendar. And it's one that we mark, of course, we coincide with the launch of the annual Social Justice Statement. What you may not have known is that our bishops have issued an annual Social Justice Statement practically every year since 1940, would you believe? It's a long and golden history, and I've been looking back through the statements in recent weeks, and you can track the evolution of society and the world. The bishops have always been very much in touch with the issues that we Catholics and Christians globally need to know, and should be involved in and praying for. So world peace and truth, the theme we're hearing today, is clearly on the top of everyone's minds here today and at the moment in the world. So we commend the bishops for this vision and this leadership, this pastoral leadership that they show us, and we thank them. These declarations are issued in the hope of provoking thought and action from all of us throughout the years and beyond. Now, of course, Catholic social justice teaches us that we are all made in the image and likeness of God, and we are all born with an inalienable dignity and worth. And it's because of this that each of us has a right to live to our full potential as intended by God, that all may flourish. And a convenient yardstick by which you can possibly tell whether justice is effectively present in a given situation is to ask, is real responsibility being exercised by the people most affected by the decisions that are being made? Is real responsibility being exercised by the people most affected by the decisions that are being made? And equally importantly, are they being invited to partake in that decision making? Are they a part of it? I ask you to hold those questions. Hold them today as we listen to our speakers, to Bishop Vincent and to Professor Hodge, and perhaps use them as a starting point for when we invite you to talk to the person next to you soon. I'll hand over back to Peter now, who will continue with the formal welcome and introduction.
Thanks, Greg. Just a few housekeeping matters. I'm sure you've noticed by now the bathrooms are either side of the stage. The male bathrooms to your left and the female bathrooms to the right of the stage. In the unlikely event of an emergency, we'd ask you to calmly and quietly proceed to the entrance you came in and assemble at the car park. Just a few months ago, my colleague from the office, Harrison, and I spent some time here in the diocese at Emerton talking to Auntie Jenny and members of Babayan, yarning about their experiences, especially in the wake of the Voice referendum. It was a great privilege to be with them and to hear from them about those experiences and those feelings. And so we're very happy to be here today, to have the privilege of acknowledging the Darug and Gundungurra peoples on whose country we gather today. And might we also acknowledge the various countries on which those of you listening in on the live stream are living as well. We pay our respects to the elders of the Darug and Gundungurra peoples who are present in this community today and who have a deep and intimate relationship with this country. Indeed, they are an inseparable part of this country. This always was and always will be Darug and Gundungurra country. I now have the privilege of welcoming my friend, Sister Susan Connolly, to lead us in prayer. Dr. Susan Connolly is a sister of St. Joseph. She has a passionate interest in the struggle of the people of Timor-Leste for justice and has worked and walked alongside them since, I think, 1994. She also shares with me a great passion for the struggles for human rights and justice of the people of West Papua. In fact, we went to West Papua together, I think in 2018, and visited people there. Susan did a doctoral thesis, and the results of her thesis were published in a book called East Timor, René Girard, and Neo-Colonial Violence. Susan has a particular interest in the work of René Girard and his reflections on human violence and scapegoating and how it explains the many upheavals in human history. Susan is a member of the Josephite Justice Group. She is chair of the New South Wales Timor Sea Justice Forum, and she is also, most importantly for us, the chair of the Australian Catholic Social Justice Council. Please welcome Susan.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. And if you hadn't mentioned West Papua, I would have. It was a tremendous privilege to go to that place with this good man. Now, we're going to pray now, friends, and we all know that God hears the prayers in our hearts. We know that. But when we're together as a group, I really do believe that we should speak definitely and loudly. Not because God won't hear us otherwise, but because we need each other's support. So you've got a prayer there somewhere among your belongings, and you might have to juggle your cup, but I'm going to ask you to stand in a moment, and we're going to say this prayer loudly and deliberately. And it's a beautiful prayer. Thank you very much, Peter, for getting it ready. It's adapted from Pope Francis's beautiful writings. And I do think it's something that we could take home and use more often than today. So let us stand in silence. Let us pray. O God, Trinity of love, from the profound communion of your divine life, pour out upon us a torrent of sisterly and brotherly love. Grant us the love reflected in the actions of Jesus in his family of Nazareth and in the early Christian community. Grant that we Christians may live the gospel, discovering Christ in each human being, recognise him crucified in the sufferings of the abandoned and forgotten of our world, and risen in each sister or brother who makes a new start. Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty, reflected in all the peoples of the earth, so that we may discover anew that all are important and all are necessary, different faces of the one humanity that God so loves. Amen.
Thank you so much, Susan. Archbishop Timothy Costello, Archbishop of Perth, apologises for his inability to attend today. He is the President of the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, and we have a video message from him about the social justice statement which is launched today.
In 1963, Pope St. John XXIII issued his groundbreaking encyclical letter, Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth. At a very fraught time, it was an impassioned plea, not only to the Church, but to all people of goodwill, for an end to war and the banning of nuclear weapons. He called for the promotion of peace founded on a commitment to the inviolable dignity of every human being. His successors have seen the devastating effect of wars and conflicts since 1963 and have repeated the same call. The 2024-2025 Social Justice Statement, Truth and Peace, a Gospel Word in a Violent World, scrutinises the signs of our own times in the light of the Gospel, sees the violence and asks why the world is as it is and what is needed for there to be peace. It also asks the question, is peace possible? And in a world where many think peace is a mirage, the statement puts its faith in the possibility of peace. In doing so, it looks back to Pacem in Terris and looks also to Pope Francis's encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti. Drawing upon Scripture, the statement invites us to put our trust in the power of the crucified and risen Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life, and also the Prince of Peace. From him, we learn to embrace a culture of encounter and to commit to the way of dialogue at both the macro and micro level. Words are never enough to make peace. Action is required. But words such as found in this statement can help us understand the current situation and how we might work together to create a world which better matches both human desire and the divine plan. The Australian bishops offer this gospel word to all who are committed to speaking the truth and working for peace in a violent world.
The Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference and the Commission for Social Justice are very, very pleased and very honoured to introduce to you and welcome our first keynote speaker here this morning. Associate Professor Joel Hodge is Associate Professor and National Head of the School of Theology at the Australian Catholic University, and we thank him for travelling up from the Melbourne campus today to be with us. Joel is author of Violence in the Name of God, the militant jihadist response to modernity, and also Resisting Violence and Victimisation, Christian Faith and Solidarity in East Timor. He is also co-editor of the book series Violence, Desire and the Sacred, and president of the Australian Catholic Theological Association. He's been involved in various justice groups and associations, including Friends and Partners with East Timor. We're very honoured to have you here with us this morning, Joel. Please join me in welcoming Joel to the podium.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the Catholic Bishops' Conference for issuing this statement, and thanks particularly for Peter and Greg for inviting me to speak today, and Bishop Vincent and the team at Parramatta Diocese for hosting us. And congratulations on this really excellent statement, and really encourage each of you, if you haven't had a chance to read it through, to do so closely, slowly, take in all the different ideas that are there. They're really worthwhile grappling with and thinking about if you've got some time and some chance to talk to other people. Hopefully you'll be able to do that today. Not sure which way to point this, but here we go. So if we take a moment to just think about our own time, our own context today, as the statement does, we can realise the extraordinary time in which we live and the unique dynamics that we face. And the statement outlines some of these dynamics and the way in which they contribute to the crisis and erosion of truth. So some of them that they name, the dynamics that they name are the competing truth claims that we face, particularly in the public sphere and online, the loss of authority and trust, particularly in the public arena, the growth of social media, as well as the growth of computing power, the technology that we have in AI, and the corporations who control them, and a culture of individualism and self-promotion, as well as a growth in bias and prejudice. So the statement names a number of these things and asks us to reflect on them. As I was doing that, I thought about some other dynamics and particularly the way in which culture changes, the way in which our own context changes over time. It seems at the moment that some of the things we face are so difficult and immediate. But I was reflecting on when I was at school and when I started teaching at university that relativism and atheism were the dominant cultural trends. The new atheists were on the rise. Some of you may not even know who they were. They were so popular 10, 20 years ago. And it was widely proclaimed that I have my truth and you have yours, and never shall the two meet. But now we have people like Richard Dawkins, who was one of the new atheists, calling himself a cultural Christian. We have Ayaan Hirsi Ali converting to Christianity. And we have truth claims re-emerging in the public sphere with a vengeance. So much so that if one transgresses the dominant cultural attitudes around race, gender and sexuality, that one can be cancelled. So, yet truth is not just a battleground in the culture wars. Truth claims took on a life and death quality during the COVID pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. We think of all the conspiracy theories there. And this continues in contemporary conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza and Sudan, for example, and with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. There's all kinds of explanations going on around that. Yet, as truth claims take centre stage, again, conspiracies and ideologies abound. It seems extraordinary that in an age of reason, and that's supposedly what we are in post the Enlightenment, and in a time of unprecedented education, we have to remember in the last 100 years, we're in a unique time that all people have access to education. That is unique in human history. It's only been in the last 100 years or so that that's been the case. So in an age of reason and of unprecedented education, people seem willing to believe all kinds of strange and complicated things, particularly online. It's quite ironic, isn't it? And troubling. Belief, too, is making a resurgence. Belief was supposed to be out the door, remember, in an age of reason. Or more accurately, belief, like truth, was always there and is now just revealing itself again. As G.K. Chesterton said, when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. And so in this current moment, we can be troubled by all kinds of dynamics that we're facing, all these dangerous trends, but we can recognize too that humans are grappling with some goods, some things like belief, truth, goodness. They're trying to come to terms with these things, even in the midst of these dangerous movements that we're facing. And there's some consolation for us, if we're Catholic or of a religious tradition, in recognizing this, because we naturally swim in the waters of belief and truth. Yet, of course, there is a real danger when belief, truth, and goodness are not properly orientated and integrated. As we are seeing in more extreme online behaviour, cultural and religious movements, acts of terrorism, and intractable international conflicts. But we have to remember, and here's a little theological lesson, as St. Augustine argued, evil is not a thing in itself, but rather it's a distortion of the good. So all the things, all the bad dynamics or the problematic dynamics that we're facing today are good things going wrong. And we need to reorientate those good things towards truth and goodness. But we also have to realize that when good is distorted, it can become something that exploits and hurts. Truth can be distorted into conspiracy and lies. Goodness can be distorted into virtue signaling and mob behavior. And belief can be distorted into violence and idolatry. As the social justice statement outlines, such a situation of post-truth hardens our egos and our social relations into poisonous self-righteousness and self-aggrandizement, leading to mistrust, polarization, populism, authoritarianism, and conflict. And here's just one quote from the statement. All of this points to a crisis of truth, which creates in turn the crisis of trust, lying at the heart of the world's current convulsions. Because without trust, there can be no peace, and certainly not the reconciliation which lies a step beyond peace. So the grammar underlying this statement is that truth creates trust, and trust creates peace. We speak truth to build trust, and we build trust to make peace. To speak the truth is already the beginning of peacemaking. And that's our particular challenge, perhaps, today from the social justice statement. How do we speak truth in a charitable and loving way? How do we help truth to build up peace? Because, of course, we can use truth as a weapon as well. We can use it to bring people down. We can use it to hurt people. How do we use truth to build people up, to help build honesty and trust? Underlying the proliferation of post-truth belief systems and conflict, we must recognize a social and existential problem, though, that we're all grappling with, but we don't often recognize. We're trying to come to terms with who we are as persons in community, and about what we believe about ourselves and others. It used to be easy, in pre-modern times, to believe things about who we are and what it means to be human, because our culture gave us a lot of answers. But now, in our current context, the answers about what it means to be human and how to live a good human life have fragmented. There are all kinds of answers to those questions now. And we're challenged, each of us, to come up with our own answer. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to live a good human life? And there are no scientific answers to those questions. There's only faith. We can only come to an answer about what it means to be human by believing something. But of course, there are many ideologies and conspiracies that try to fill the void about what it means to be human. And they do so with powerful messages and social techniques. But these messages are invariably rivalistic. They try to create enemies by casting our demons onto others. And they try to build identity and community over against other people. And that's always dangerous. And it's always something that goes against the gospel message. This is a false peace that human beings have manufactured since the beginning of culture. Human beings have always resorted to this false peace of building up over against others. You might recognize it in your own context. It's a piece of that the theorist René Girard talks about at length. It's based on a lie that we tell ourselves and about God, that it's okay to create enemies, to make victims. We tell ourselves that lie, based on a distortion of our human desire. Our human desire is unique, it's unrestricted, it's looking for ways to be fulfilled. And we often fulfill it in unhealthy ways by ganging up against other people. And we do this on a cultural level as well. We look for ways to fulfill our infinite desire. Each of us has an infinite, unrestricted desire for the good, for love. But we use that sometimes in an idolatrous manner. And we can see the way in which modernity creates false idols for us. Exploitative consumerism, rampant addiction, widespread pornographic use, political and cultural polarization. All of these are false idols where we're trying to fulfill our infinite desire for the good. So the construction of identity over against others is a temptation that we all face, but one that we all have to resist because it leads towards conflict ultimately, not towards peace. But it is an attitude that is still predominant in modernity, and it takes on a particular character in modernity. That's Girard there. This attitude of building up over against others takes on a particular character in modernity, where we focus on the individual. We think the individual, our individual identity, is absolute and sovereign and must be protected at all cost. And the US journalist David Brooks talks about this autonomy-based liberalism that tries to construct our identity over against others in a particular way. It starts with the conviction that I possess myself, that I own myself, that I am a project that I am creating on my own, and that I can, no one has the right to tell me how to build up my own identity or to dispose of myself or other people. Now, of course, we are persons who have freedom, but the lie of individualism tells us that we are absolute and sovereign and that we can use anything for our own happiness and our own fulfillment. This kind of attitude leads to a turn inward that blocks genuine relationship with others and with God. And the result of this kind of extreme individualism is increasing social isolation and fanaticism. And we see it reflected, I think, in the growth of mental health problems, of suicide rates, of mistrust, of extremism. Thus, the problem of belief and truth is ultimately a problem of desire, searching for fulfillment, searching for the infinite. Peace can only come if such a desire can be properly recognized and orientated. Peace is not just a matter of negotiating agreements, of saying that we'll stop fighting. And it's even not just a matter of just social relationships. It's a matter of addressing the restlessness of the human heart. As St. Augustine beautifully put it a long time ago, the human heart is restless. It seeks for that infinite fulfillment. And the social justice statement that you all have has some excellent suggestions for action that will help in the endeavour of addressing the restlessness of the human heart. It doesn't just talk about certain social actions you can undertake. It does talk about that, and they're important. But it also talks about prayer, about reflection. That's really important too. And in order, I think, for those actions to be effective, let me suggest an alternative to autonomy-based individualism. And David Brooks calls it a gift-based liberalism. It's where we, instead of seeing ourselves as an individual who can just use things for their own fulfillment and happiness, I see myself as a person who's been given a life, who's been given gifts. And I'm part of a long procession of humanity who's been gifted with life by someone, the someone we call God, and been given so many good things, relationships, family, talents, all these gifts that I can use for the good of others. And the key point here is to recognize that I have been given something, that I can receive these gifts. It's not about taking and grasping, which is what Adam and Eve did in the garden. That was their sin. They took and grasped. But instead, the call is to receive. Receive the gifts that I've been given. Receive the gifts of friendship, of love that each of us have been given in our lives, which is most important. And perhaps if we take up this attitude, we can overcome that most misleading lie that all of us are tempted to believe, that no one cares for us and that we are not worthy of other people, that we are not worthy of love. There's some interesting studies around this that actually a lot of people believe very deeply that they are unworthy of love and friendship of other people. But actually, and of course the Christian message tells us that we have a dignity and that we are worthy of that love. And if we can recognize this, if we can recognize that God comes to us as our forgiveness, as our love, then perhaps we have the chance for peace. We have the chance for encounter that the bishop's statements talks about. The chance for the encounter of love, where I receive the gift of love and I can enter into the dialogue of love, the back and forth of love. Only in that way can we truly, I think, achieve peace. And in that conclusion, I recommend again the justice statement to you, the social justice statement to you, to reflect on some of those themes more deeply. And I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thanks very, very much, Joel. You've given us some tremendous fodder there to reflect on, and an incredibly thoughtful, intellectual, but also a practical assessment, and if you like, affirmation of the true value and significance of the statement. Thank you again. We're now very pleased to welcome your very own bishop, our very own Bishop, Vincent Long, who has been Bishop of the Diocese of Parramatta now for 7 years. Parramatta is, of course, the youngest, but also the most multicultural diocese in Australia. And in speaking with Councillor Lake this morning, I came to appreciate the incredible breadth and the incredible rich tapestry that makes Cumberland and Parramatta the local government area and also the diocese that it is. It's quite an extraordinary diversity that is just beautiful to see and observe. Bishop Vincent is the only Vietnamese bishop outside of Vietnam and the first Vietnamese-born bishop in Australia. He is a conventual Franciscan friar, and he studied for the priesthood in Melbourne after journeying to Australia as a refugee from Vietnam. And after his priestly ordination in 1989, he was sent to Rome for further studies and was awarded a licentiate in Christology and Spirituality from the Pontifical Faculty of St Bonaventure. On his return to Australia, he served as a priest in Parramatta and then Victoria before being elected Superior of the Order of the Friars Minor Conventuals in Australia in 2005. He served as Assistant General in Rome from 2008 to 2011 and is responsible for the Asia-Oceania section of his order. In 2011, he was appointed Auxiliary Bishop of Melbourne Archdiocese, and he served in that role for nearly 5 years. And during that period, he was Episcopal Vicar for Justice and Peace and for Social Services, and was Chair of the Catholic Education Commission of Victoria. As you heard earlier, Bishop Vincent is nationally working with us in the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference as Chair of the Bishops' Commission for Social Justice, Mission and Service, and with his brother bishops serves to discern and lead all that the Church needs to understand and embrace in social justice. It's an honour to serve alongside him. Please join me in welcoming Bishop Vincent.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Professor Joe Hodge, for your reflection. And thank you, everyone sitting here, for your interest in this year's social justice statement, and also your commitment to social justice. And I say the same to those following us online. August, particularly the Feast of the Assumption, is very dear to my heart because 44 years ago I was on a boat escaping the chaos of war, oppression, and retribution following the fall of Saigon. Vietnam was the longest 20th century conflict in which Australian soldiers participated. Unparalleled cruelty and violence ravaged many other parts of the world. Millions lost their lives in global and regional wars as guns, bombs, and missiles ruthlessly tore through their flesh and bones and left their homes, villages, and cities as scenes of utter devastation. In 1945, the dropping of nuclear weapons on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki introduced the world to a frightening new chapter in the history of humanity. Imagine thousands of people vaporized in an instant and thousands more condemned to an agonizing death. Imagine a thriving city turned into a virtual wasteland in the blink of an eye. While nuclear weapons have not been used since then, violence and conflict continue to plague our world in this 21st century. As this year's social justice statement points out, there are over 50 state-based conflicts and over 80 non-state-based conflicts raging across the globe at the moment. We know all too well about some of these conflicts, such as the war in Israel and Palestine, or the war between Russia and Ukraine. But there are many more that are not so well known, like in Sudan, in Myanmar, in West Papua, in Somalia, to mention just a few. Yet whether we know about these conflicts or not, the consequences for our fellow human beings are just as devastating, as lethal for little children, their mothers or their fathers, their grandparents. In every century up to the present, grief and loss are the constant companions of those caught up in the senselessness of war. Is it any wonder that Pope Francis recently said that our world is on the abyss, But despite all of these seemingly endless horrors, the bishop's statement this year is not one of resignation and pessimism. We cling to the hope that springs from the God who is love, the God who loved each and every one of us into being and bestowed upon us the dignity that no one can take away. In the face of the many lies and false promises of tyrants, this truth, the truth that we are loved by God and born to live in peace and to flourish, continues to fill the dreams of every Christian man and woman, every person of goodwill. While we may stand on the abyss, we can turn back if we are prepared to take the risk of challenging the lies of the merchants of war and to embrace with passion and commitment what has always brought peace and joy to every human heart. I could speak about many conflicts that beset our world at present, but let me just talk about one which has filled our television screens for the last 10 months. How can we not be deeply distressed by what has happened to the Holy Land since October the 7th last year? The unspeakable brutality of Hamas visited on so many Israelite children, women and men, students and workers from other countries too is outrageous. And still, there are many still held hostage and wondering if they will ever see their loved ones again. What has happened to Palestinians in Gaza since that fateful day must also tear at the hearts of anyone with even a shred of human decency. Thousands of women, children, men dead, thousands starving to death, thousands homeless. Surely God weeps over the unholy tragedy which is unfolding in this Holy Land. Pope Francis recently encouraged young people especially to put aside screen time and to read books of literature and poetry. And Mosab Abu is a Palestinian poet living in Gaza. Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear is a poem he addressed to a doctor who was treating his wounded ear. And it reads, "When you open my ear, touch it gently. My mother's voice lingers somewhere inside. Her voice is the echo that helps recover my equilibrium when I feel dizzy during my attentiveness. The drone's buzzing sound, the roar of an F-16, the screams of bombs falling on houses, on fields, on bodies, of rockets flying away. Read my small ear canal of them all. Spray perfume of your smiles on the incision. Inject the song of life into my veins. Gently beat the drum so my mind may dance with yours, my doctor, day and night." Couldn't we imagine an Israelite saying the same things, or a Ukrainian, or a Russian, or anyone caught up in the devastation of war anywhere in the world? Beneath our skins, our cultures, our religions, we all long for the same thing, and that is peace and security. Peace and security will never be guaranteed by more and more guns and bullets, bombs and missiles, or tanks and fighter jets and battleships. Peace flourishes when we see each and every person not as an enemy to fear or to distrust, but as they truly are, our sisters and brothers. Peace flourishes when we step out of our comfort zone, seek dialogue and friendship with people who are different from us. We cultivate a culture of peace when we cultivate this culture of encounter and dialogue, when we see everyone, not as a stranger to be feared, but as members of one human family. In Jesus, God breaks the grip of scapegoating by stepping into the place of victim. There's a bit of René Girard there. His death and resurrection means that God has reset the cycle of human behavior. We can and must resist the spiral of violence. In God's world, peacemaking is possible. Swords can be turned into plowshares, and swords can be turned into sickles as well. Peacemaking involves the extraordinarily beautiful and wonderful things emerging from the most ordinary actions of people willing to reach out to others in friendship, to seek understanding, to work together for the common good. And that is what we, the bishops, invite everyone to do in their own way by simple but powerful actions which strengthen the bonds of peace. Let's all do something every day to change the talk of conflict and war to that of friendship and peace. I'd like to end by another poem by Mary Oliver, which expresses the idea so beautifully. It is called Wage Peace. May we all reject the logic of violence and wage peace with the logic of encounter, dialogue, friendship, and love. Wage peace with your breath. Breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships. Wage peace with your listening. Hearing silence, pray aloud. Play music, learn the word for thank you in 3 languages. Learn to knit and to make a hat. Think of chaos as dancing raspberries. Imagine grief as the outbreak of beauty or the gesture of fish. Swim for the other side. Wage peace. Never has the world seemed so fresh and precious. Have a cup of tea and rejoice. Act as if armistice has already arrived. Don't wait another minute. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Bishop Vincent, for those powerful reflections and for the beautiful invitations that you've concluded with there. And we have much to go away and do, don't we? After listening to Bishop Vincent and Joel here this morning. I'd like to invite you now to pause. And I extend this invitation to those of you who are viewing online as well. Reflect on what we've heard here today. Pray, if you might. Reflect deeply on what we see and what we hear in our own lives. Reflect on the relevance of the messages here this morning and of the power of the social justice statement, its timeliness, its significance. Listen to our hearts, listen to our souls. Call upon God, if you like, your God, our God, God. One God, everyone's God. Draw from your faith and your belief, your upbringing, your life experiences. How am I going to promote truth and bring peace into the world today, a troubled world. I'd like you and invite you now to turn to the person to your left or your right. I'm not sure which is going to work, but negotiate that with those people either side of you. Introduce yourself and share with them the messages we've heard today. What resonated? What came through? What spoke to you? What might you go forward and live? How might we all make a difference to our society and to promote peace, to promote truth? If you could take 5 minutes now to talk to the person alongside you. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to call you back to order in 5 minutes and invite 2, 3, 4 of you to speak into a roving microphone and to share a key message that came through in your conversation, that you feel would be worthy of sharing with the gathering here today and those online. For those of you online, you have an email address which is OJEP, which is the acronym for Office of Justice, Ecology and Peace, at catholic.org.au, and we invite you to send your short 1 or 2 sentence reflection to that email address, or if it is accessible to you, the online chat forum. We will take some of these, depending on time, and share them with all of us, and we will invite Bishop Long and Joel Hodge to respond to some of these comments or questions or reflections that have come forward. So take 5 minutes starting now, and we will resume shortly. Thank you. at home or online. There was a tremendous buzz here in the hall at St Paul's College, and it was really great to hear. So good on you all, and thank you very much for what seemed to be very fruitful and animated conversation. So we're now going to, as I indicated, invite some of you to feed back what you think is a critical or key reflection that would benefit from being shared with the audience, and in particular invite either or Bishop Vincent Long and Joel Hodge to give their thoughts in response. So it's probably a great opportunity to start with those who are soon to become the future leaders of our church and society. And we have a number of students here today from Patrician Brothers College, Nagle College, Surdon College, St Margaret Mary's Primary School, Parramatta Marist High, and here St Paul's College at Greystanes present, which is tremendous. I'm going to invite one of the students from St Paul's College, a Year 12 student. If we could bring the microphone up, please, to that row. And you might just introduce yourself by telling us your name, remembering you're speaking to millions online, though they can't see you.
Yeah, that's all good.
And share what you discussed in your group with your fellow Year 12 students.
Well, first of all, is this mic on? One sec.
And we need some more volume. There we go. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Saab. I'm here as the college vice captain of the college with my peers. And one thing that really stuck to us was, I guess, breaking down the idea of peace, and with Joel and going on the idea of truth. It really spoke to us because obviously day to day we're exposed to we're exposed to a lot of, I guess, stories on the idea where peace is, I guess, not expressed in the world. And what we've discussed is, how loving our God is, and using what we've learned when we go to Mass every day, and just expressing what peace really is, and going with the idea that we're so thankful to be in this community that's so multicultural and so diverse, yet we're also loving for one another, and we really express who we are as one. And we've broken down the idea that it's expressed day to day as Christians. We try to express peace for all with the interfaith organisations and the ecumenical councils around our state and the country, where we push for peace. And every day we're trying to learn more, and I guess being, it's our last year at the college here, and we're going into, I guess, the real world and the outside world. We really just want to find out, what other ways can we strive for peace, and how can we be, in the future, a representation of peace and a representation of Jesus Christ to all. So that's what we gathered. Thank you.
Would Bishop Long or Joel wish to make any comment in response?
Thank you to you and your fellow Year 12. Yes, we are very fortunate to live in a peaceful country called Australia. Though there is a diversity of backgrounds, faiths, religions, etc., we coexist fairly harmoniously. That's not to say that we haven't got our share of challenges in addressing some of the issues we face as a community. And I think from the Christian perspective, we are a religion of peace. We are promoting a culture of respect, welcome and dialogue, and it's in our DNA to exhibit the characteristics of the God of hospitality, the God who who created each one of us with an inalienable dignity. And so I think it's important for us to cultivate that culture of understanding, of mutual understanding and mutual respect, despite our differences. I think differences can then enrich us. Differences can then strengthen the bonds of cohesion among us, rather than something that tear the cohesion apart.
That was an excellent reflection, guys. Just well done. And there were so many important themes there, but just to pick up on maybe one or two, that there is, as I said in my speech and as you said, there are so many different messages and ideas, ideologies that are out there tugging at us, wanting our attention. And they're going to play particularly on our, not just on our mind, but on our heart, on our desires. They're going to try to manipulate us sometimes into the way we desire things. And so where peace starts is, of course, with us in our own hearts. How do we orientate ourselves? How do we get in touch with our own desires in a really deep way? And when we do that, we're getting in touch with God in a really tangible and important way. So the first thing in the statement, it says, start with yourself. Invite God to nurture peace in your heart. How do we become a witness of peace, as you were saying? And then it has to start with us. We need to take action, and I've been involved in many groups of social justice since I was a teenager, and action and advocacy is so important. But how do we cultivate the peace within ourselves that then radiates out into others? And people will notice that. They'll take notice of that. And when we become a witness of peace, that is powerful. And in that way, we become a witness to Jesus.
It's a tremendous question to start us going. Thanks again to the students of St. Paul's College here at Greystones. So we go from our future leaders to our present leaders. And I'd like to thank again Hugh McDermott, the State Member for Prospect, and the Mayor of Cumberland City, Lisa Lake, for being with us this morning. And I'd invite Lisa to say a few words on behalf of our present leaders.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for inviting me here this morning. I've really listened very attentively, taken lots of notes, because I was looking this morning for a bit of inspiration at this time of the year. I think we could all do with some uplifting thinking and reflection. The thing that I have really noted and listened carefully to was your theme about trust, because with a politician, of course, trying to get people to trust you is probably the biggest challenge, particularly in local government. I have to tell you, there is a real problem with trust in the local government area. And so the idea that speaking truth promotes trust is something that I really want to carry forward. I have a candidates forum this afternoon with all the people against me at the next election, and we will all be making commitments and talking about our track record. I'll keep in mind that it's the truth that will create the trust, and it's the trust that will create peace. And if we're going to be anything as leaders, we should be examples of peace. So thank you very much this morning, Joel. I've really enjoyed listening to what you have to say.
Thanks. That, I think, is a really key, as you say, trust, and in leadership it's so important. That was a very powerful reflection. I was just reading an article yesterday by the former spokesman for Bill Clinton and others, and he was talking about how in the political realm we see the opposite of trust and of honesty and humility oftentimes now. We're seeing that with the presidential candidates that we see in the US, but also in other places. And so he was actually writing and pleading for leaders to think about not just the short-term gain from, saying all kinds of, big things, making all these grand statements, maybe even abusing their opponent and all that kind of thing like we see in campaigns, but actually being a little bit humble and honest, and that will be the, that'll be the long game. And really good leaders, he pointed out, are able to get into that zone of, of trust, of honesty, of truth. It's not easy. He said, of course, the political game is tough. It can be brutal, but just a little bit of that in public life would be such a powerful model, and it will actually get people's trust in the long term, even if maybe in the short term you lose out to someone who's more loud and abusive or something like that. So how humility, truth, trust all kind of go together, I think that brought that home to me.
I think one of the elements in the statement is truth belongs to the whole community, and none of us has the complete truth. None of us has monopoly or exclusive access to truth. We live in a very polarized society, very polarized world. It's not just in the US where the polarization is quite toxic, but I think that there are elements of that polarization in our own society, in our own political discourse, whether in the federal parliament in Canberra or in the council chamber. I think the challenge for us is to not just to be convinced of our version of truth, but to learn what elements of truth are present on the other side of the political divide, or on the other side of the aisle, whatever the arena might be, the only way that we can create a more wholesome and cohesive community when we recognize that the truth can reside in the other, whoever the other might be, could be for a Christian it might be a Muslim or a Buddhist or a liberal versus a Labour or whatever, and so there is a certain humility and vulnerability in reaching out and in recognizing that the truth belongs to the whole community. I was in the Holy Land in 2019 for the first time, and among other things I met a group which is called Relatives and Friends of the Victims of the Palestinian-Israeli War, and they're not just Palestinians, but they're also Israelite members of that group who are united by a common thing, and that's called grief. And by sharing grief, by speaking from their wounded heart, they search for a better mutual understanding and appreciation. And I think that's what they're doing, sowing the seeds for a future peace.
Thank you to both of you. Now, we are getting near the end, but we have time for two more, and I think I've identified who I will invite to speak. Firstly, one of the As I mentioned, one of the dioceses that's represented here today is the Diocese of Broken Bay, and we are today blessed by many women in roles of lay leadership in our church. It's a sign of the times, and so Kelly Paget is the Canonical Chancellor of the Diocese of Broken Bay and also the Director of Mission, and Kelly would like to say a few words.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing today, and we certainly took a lot from both aspects. Firstly, we're looking at the culture wars that we are so often drawn into, and so that concept of truth being a vehicle of trust. It's not to be a vehicle to hit people over the head with, and that truth must be there for an encounter with people. And if we use truth in an aggressive way, we won't get anywhere. So that really was very important to us, and how that transition from truth to trust brings peace. And finally, we thought with Bishop Vincent, the way you brought poetry into it today was a really good way of turning our hearts to listen to that moment of truth. Because if we, as it says in the beginning of the document, it doesn't start with us, and even these moments of angst and fear that war in our world can bring us, if we actually can't be peaceful in ourselves and have that cup of tea and to learn to say thank you in 3 languages, even in that despair and trial, we must be situated ourselves, and our souls must be situated in peace. So we thank you for those reflections.
Thank you, Kelly. Our final contribution will come from Mr. Jack de Groot. Jack is, of course, the Director of Schools here in the Diocese of Parramatta. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Greg. This is more a point of reflection. I'm really thankful for Lisa's comment then, Susan's prayer, and Lisa's reflection and question. And it's something I want to offer about we as the Catholic Church and leadership. And I don't want to personalise this to any of the main speakers today. But women are most commonly cancelled when it comes to speaking truth. We saw it last week in the House, where Zali Steggall was spoken over frequently, and other women came to be with her knowing that experience. We see it in the Me Too movement and the cancellation of women's voice. When it comes to war, terror, violence, which this document also speaks to, it's women who are weaponised in all sorts of ways as the victims of violence. We see it in the violence on the 7th of October and subsequently over the last 10 months. It's the same in the Ukraine, and it's the same in every conflict I've ever read, studied or listened to survivors of. In this document and in the reflections today, men have spoken, men have written. In the keynote address, not one woman was mentioned or quoted. I think that's right, Joel. Mary Oliver was quoted. In the text of the document, the first scriptural passage referred to is Genesis 3. It's a serpent talking to a woman. And we know how that text has led to the misogynising of our culture as Christians and Catholics. So the reflection, and it's not really asking for another man to speak, I've done this well enough myself, is when will we actually understand who wears the burden of truth being cancelled and the violence of conflict?
We have one more response, and it is from a lady, and it is Sister Susan Connolly, Dr. Susan Connolly, who would like to respond, and you'll step up.
Thank you. I was very grateful for that last comment, thank you very much, but for all of them. And I'd just like to put in a word about anonymity. So I'm standing here as a woman at this about truth. I really get upset at the anonymous posts on social media. Now, I know sometimes anonymity is important. You see in papers a letter with name withheld for good reason. But I think if we cannot put our name to something, it's not worth saying. And I just think that's a challenge that we could say to people. People hide behind nom de plumes or screen names, or, you know, you're supposed you register for something and you put a screen name. I put my screen name, Sister Susan Connolly, because if you cannot say something and put your name to it, well, it's not worth saying, and I think that's a challenge we ought to take up. You young people here, be careful of that. You know, if we can't say it, just remember that. If you can't put your name to it, it's not worth saying, mostly. Thanks very much for the intervention.
Thank you to Bishop Long and to Joel again for all that you've contributed to making this such a special occasion this morning. And thank you to all of those who have raised questions, comments and reflections. I'll hand over now to my colleague Peter Arndt to close proceedings for today, and we will then finish and adjourn for refreshments. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. So yes, a few thank yous. Firstly, want to thank our guest speakers, our Associate Professor Joel Hodge and Bishop Vincent Long. Most of us don't take to public speaking like ducks to water. I think for most of us it's pretty nerve-wracking. You hope that you make sense to your audience at least. Even better if you say something that your audience thinks is profound and memorable. Well, I can tell Bishop Vincent and Joel that you did say some things that I think were profound and memorable and gave us all something to think about hard when we leave. And I do hope that we'll get your respective permissions to publish your speeches online so that people can go back to them and read them and reflect more deeply on what our mission is as peacemakers. We want to give you a memento, both of you, to give you an opportunity to read something and deeply reflect. Bishop Vincent, you quoted the Palestinian poet Abu Toha in your address. We'd like to present you and Joel with a book of his poetry titled Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear. And I hope you enjoy reading that poetry, both of you. So thank you for what you shared with us today, both of you. We'd certainly like to thank all of you who attended in person today, the young and not so young, and for your participation. Thanks to Susan Connolly for leading us in prayer. I'd like to thank Our Lady Queen of Peace Parish and the college community at St John's here for graciously welcoming us today. This sort of event takes a lot of organising, and we owe a great debt of gratitude to the staff in the Chancery of Parramatta Diocese. Thank you to all of you for all the hard work you've done. Thank you, Antonella, Anita, Rachel, Sebastian, who's still on leave, Belinda and Anthony. I'd also like to thank those people back in Canberra at the Bishops' Conference Secretariat who had a part to play in tidying up this statement and getting it to publication stage, especially Jeremy and Paul and Ryan and Camilla. I do want to pay special thanks to two people from the Secretariat who are here today, Father Chris D'Souza, the General Secretary, and my co-MC, Greg Bainey, who have been an enormous source of support to our office, to me in particular, in the long struggle towards getting this publication to the launch phase today. I'd also like to pay special thanks to my co-worker in the Office for Justice, Ecology and Peace, Harrison. We both share a great passion for social justice, but I have my head often in the clouds and my eyes in the stars, whereas Harrison has his feet firmly planted on Mother Earth and his eyes sharply focused on the real world. It makes for a great team, and thanks Harrison for going on the journey with me over a long and winding road to this day. One last thank you to my Yoda, who thankfully, unlike his predecessors, Fergus and Mac, did not let out a loud yawn while I was speaking in public. One last thing I'd like you all to do, whether you're online or here in the hall. Could you take a moment to silently make a commitment to cultivate a culture of peace, to see all who are caught up in violence and conflict as our sisters and brothers, whether it's overseas, like Palestinians and Israelis, Ukrainians and Russians, Sudanese people, people of Myanmar, West Papua, in Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang province in China, but also those people who face the daily struggle against violence and abuse in our own country. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, refugees and asylum seekers, women caught up in the hellhole of domestic violence, people with disability, older people being neglected in their homes, homeless people, members of the LGBTIQ community. As you make that commitment in your hearts, I'd like you now, as a final act before we go to morning tea, to turn to your sisters and brothers near you and offer them some sign of peace, and share your commitment that you've just made if you wish. So let's offer each other a sign of peace and commit ourselves to be peacemakers.
Now, friends, morning tea beckons. Will you please join with me in thanking the Director of the Office for Justice, Ecology and Peace, Mr. Peter Arndt, for not only his words and his facilitation of our ceremony here this morning, but for his leadership on the range of really, really significant issues at play that have social justice at the heart of them, that Peter has just named a few in the world today. Thank you, Peter, for your passion and your commitment to your vocation. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord and each other. Thanks very much, everybody.